I am super pleased to introduce you to a teacher whose work I follow and admire, Loppon Yudron Wangmo, who is a Western-born teacher in the Nyingma lineage of Tibetan Buddhism. And today she's going to share her story with us about how she was introduced to Buddhism, how she became a serious practitioner, how she did multiple long-term retreats in the Tibetan tradition, and finally what it's been like actually becoming a teacher now, a Loppon, in this tradition. If you're just starting to learn about Buddhism, I have a free email course on the Four Noble Truths that might help you to get acquainted with the basic ideas and teachings of Buddhism. You can find a link to that in the info box. I hope you enjoyed this conversation with Loppon Yudron Wangmo, and I hope you'll stay tuned for our video next week in which she describes going for refuge in Buddhism. And spoiler alert, she's gonna offer an opportunity for anyone who wants to take refuge online. So make sure and tune in next week too. Well, thank you so much for joining me today. I want to just start with your title, the way I want to address you today as Loppon. What does that mean and how did you become a Loppon?
Loppon is a translation of the Sanskrit term acharya, and which generally is just there's like a generic term of respect in Tibetan language, everything, and probably in Sanskrit, I'm not as familiar with. There's a generic term for for regular everyday teacher, and then there's kind of an honorific term for spiritual teachers or who'd be spiritual teachers. So Loppon really means that, and it's just so in the Nyingma tradition, some people are given the title Lama, and some Loppon. It's largely the it's kind of I'm a kind of an explainer. I'm going to say Loppon is the explainer. They translate it, as master, but master has such a negative connotation, at least in Europe and Canada now, but in America, I don't ever want to use that title. So
yeah. Well, my first introduction to that title, like the translation I heard was Vajra master, and it just sounded like, whoa, like there's a lama and then there's a Vajra master above them. Is that true, or is that just me making stuff up?
Well, Vajra master is a role in a ceremony. So that's Dorje Loppon, Vajra master. And so that's more like the person presiding as the ritual leader is the Vajra master. And I guess you could say the person, your most important teacher, you could say in a Vajrayana tradition, you could say is your Vajra master. But more commonly, it's like the presider. So the Loppon is the explainer. And Dorje Loppon is the presider. And so, but then Lama will also fill the role of a Dorje Loppon by presiding over ceremonies. So that's how that. Anyway,
it sounds like the two are very similar terms.
Yeah. So basically, I'm a Dharma teacher.
That was
titles are given to give you the stamp of approval by a Lama. So Lama Pema Dorje encouraged me to teach, and without a title, nobody cares what you say, and nobody knows you have that endorsement, right? So it's like a little, the Tibetan Lamas all have a stamp made up with their personal seal of approval. So he wrote me a nice letter, talked in detail about my training background, and then sealed it with a red seal with saying and signed it. So saying he officially endorsed me as a teacher. So, and he gave me the parameters for what I should teach and that kind of thing. And other lamas, since Rinpoche has unfortunately passed into parinirvana, as we say. And so now other lamas give me teaching endorsements for various functions. So anyway, this is all very technical Tibetan things. Amazing point that I'm just a regular Dharma teacher, a lot of practice under my belt. So if you're going to use like a Sanskrit word, charya, it implies somebody who's going to go there. They might think there's a lot of academic background about Dharma, a lot of scholastic. They've been to Shedra, for example, studying Dharma. But in my tradition of the lay practitioners of the Nyingma tradition of Tibetan Buddhism, called Ngakpas or Ngakchang practitioners, there isn't a strong emphasis on scholasticism. There's more of an emphasis on practice. So that's mainly what I've done is practice, and then I've made up for it by studying afterwards more than before.
Well, I'm the journey that you went on from not really having been introduced to Buddhism. In one of your videos, you mentioned it was around age 30 that you converted, so to speak. What was that journey like for you of meeting the Dharma, as people often say, and then deciding that you wanted to become a really serious practitioner? Or maybe really serious is the wrong phrase, but deciding you wanted to really pursue this.
Yeah, serious always sounds so glum, but
Right.
there's no other real word, about that for that, I don't think. My mom was a minister of spiritual science. When she was around 30, she started getting really interested in the world's spiritual traditions. And so she went through a ministerial training program, and she specialized in doing psychic readings for people, and also healing, laying on of hands, healing, that kind of thing that was popular. This was in the 60s, 70s, 80s. And so I was raised in a house where spiritual exploration was valued, and finding your own path was valued. It was never spoken to me like, Yudron, you need to find your own path. It wasn't like that. Her mother, before her, went around to all the Christian churches, because that was her whole assumed world in Washington, D.C., and picked out what denomination she wanted to join. So in a way, I'm an inheritor of the matrilineal tradition of spiritual seekers. And my father was a constitutional lawyer, so he gave me and he worked for Congress. So he gave me a sense of rigor, and intellectual curiosity to balance out. So there's sort of the soft side, and then there's the rigorous side, a little bit of bringing your mind into it. And they came together in me. And I explored. I read mostly, and sometimes I'd go to different groups and I wanted to know what matched my intuition, what matched my childhood sense of spirituality. What were what did I think and feel about things, and find the tradition that seemed the most profound in that way. And looked and looked and looked. And also I wanted a tradition that had a lineage, meaning it had a history. It wasn't just somebody 20 years ago or 2 years ago had a spiritual revelation while they were dropping LSD somewhere and they created a religion out of it. That seemed, and I think wisely so, looking back on it, dangerous. And people can be self-deluded or whatever. Whatever the word enlightenment meant, or awakening, that sounded really cool to me. And I really wanted I wanted to do that, or at least hang around with people who had. And so I'm kind of a ponderer and a decision maker kind of person. I'm not a impulsive person. So I put a lot of thought and consideration in, and then I decided to pursue a path of training. I started out at Shambhala Center, which at the time was, they did traditional Kagyu style Tibetan Buddhism. And so they gave me a background, very nice one. They don't do this anymore, but at the time they provide a nice background in general Buddhism, the principles of basic Buddhism, and then moving into the path of the way of the Bodhisattva. And then they intimated that there was also for Vajra something called Bhajani, and you had to have a guru for that, or a teacher. And I thought, that sounds really interesting. So I'm kind of an intensity junkie, I guess. I really want to get to if I'm going to go into something, I want to go in with both feet and really, really do it. And because I dabbled, 30 is late. It's a late start. It's not too late. But, if I could do a lot more benefit in the world if I was 40 now instead of 63, you know. I started when I was a teenager. It's difficult, though, in our culture, because there's so many exciting things drawing the attention of young people. A lot of people start in their late 20s, early 30s, I think, in this time. And so I pursued, after that, I went around the Bay Area at that time in California, was so many Tibetan lamas. And so I met them. And everybody kept sending me to Lama Tarchin Rinpoche, though. And everybody respected him. And he was very charismatic, and I was totally swept away by him. And so he was my first Lama.
How did you meet? What setting was it?
I think I thought those days they let you know about events by sending out faxes, fax machines.
Wow.
To your workplace, and that was permitted. It was kind of like people did this. And so you get or a phone call, phone tree. There was no internet, right? Or it was so beginning. Phone trees, right? So you get a phone call, whatever Rinpoche is going to be. And Rinpoche was super active, going everywhere in the Bay Area that he could. And he'd started the Dharma, some big Dharma retreat center in the Santa Cruz Mountains. So he was bringing people to that by going out into the community. So I went around and with an evaluation, an eye to evaluation. What is this guy? What is this? Is this what I want? Did I connect with this? I just loved him so much. He was exuding so much love and kindness, which was truly the way he was. And while at the same time, kind of a spacious mind. So I remember this, there were two things that struck me. One time I was watching one of his events at the Palo Alto Shambhala Center, who invited him. And he was, he was talking. He was doing these motions, graceful motions with his hands. He wasn't like thinking, I need to do a motion with my hand now. It was just natural, to dance-like motions. I thought, well, that's really different. What is that? More than what he said. I don't remember what he said. But I remember these, and I realize now he'd gotten that from his training in mudra practice, the gestures of Tantric Buddhism, and then also Tantric dance. So he embodied. It was like what struck me was it wasn't a talking from the head. It was like he had integrated his spirituality with his entire body and the very way he moved in the world. And then another time, very quickly, I saw him at his own center, Pema Osaling, and he was sitting, but there was a bank of windows behind him, just like as far back as this wall is behind me. And the window, somebody had opened, and all of a sudden, you know how windows can just fall down within their track, you know, suddenly and make a huge noise. That happened right behind his head. Bam! And it like went through him. He didn't even register it, I don't think. It just flowed right through him, that big sound, like that other people would think, I'm going to die, you know. But it was like,
or at the very least jump or
yeah, jump or something. But so that was really impressed me, his embodiment. And so then I asked him to be my teacher at a public talk in Berkeley, California. And that was that. But he didn't end up being the last of my teachers. I'm a weirdo who just so enthusiastic about Dharma that I ended up taking three main teachers. I'm also Longterm Dorje, as I mentioned, and then also Pelo Rinpoche of Tibet. And each of them they all said the same thing, you know, fundamentally, same path, in essence, the same tradition. They all brought a little certain something in that I feel so lucky to have experienced.
Are they all in the Nyingma school of Tibetan Buddhism?
They are. And so it's all the same training, basically, which we don't need to go into now, but, you know, starting from the fundamentals and moving into more advanced practices. The practices themselves vary in shape and color. They're all the same, really. So in the force of the practice. So that's how I came in, and on from there.
What sold you on this tradition that I want to start doing really serious retreat, longer term retreat, this like really deep dive into practice. I mean, a lot of people find a teacher, but most people don't end up doing the amount of retreat you've done. And maybe would you just share, what you've done so people know what I'm talking about?
I think family values, that there was this idea this is something precious and this may be the more important than your love life and your job and all that. And also my own personal karmic predisposition. I probably had, I'm not saying I'm not an enlightened person and I'm not an embodiment of a previous enlightened person, but I'm definitely, like all of us who really threw themselves into it, I've got to be somehow connected to Tibet and these teachers. So I assume that. But what was the other question about what do I do then? I threw myself into practice in daily life. And while I was organizing, I was working a full-time job, eventually as the director of a nursing home. I'm a family nurse practitioner also, RN, I was, which was a very consuming job. I was also, the practices given to me by 3 different teachers, and trying to do them justice, by really putting them into practice. And then also organizing events for Adzum Rinpoche. I was one of his center leaders. And because he didn't have a lot of people who'd done the foundational practices even at that point. So I was somebody who could help new people and stuff like that and organize. And then I always wanted to do long-term retreat because that's a thought, because I wanted to really experience these teachings. What happens if you was like an astronaut, I guess. If you always wanted to be an astronaut, like, Bill Shatner finally gained to go into space. Almost, or just about. He was so happy to have done that in his life. And I wanted to shoot myself into the space of Tibetan Buddhism really badly. So I did a longer and longer. Because I was a nurse in that field, you can take off, you can quit your job, do a retreat, to get a new job or pick up on the old job with no penalty. So that was really great. And so I did a number of retreats cloistered at home on my own under the direction of one or more of my lamas, mainly Lama Pema Dorje Rinpoche. And then up to like 1 month retreat, then a 3-month retreat, then a 6-month retreat in my backyard in a like a yurt. And then really cloistered, really completely cut off from outsiders coming in, except for the Lama. And then I didn't think I could ever do the formal 3-year, 3-month, 3-day retreat that is famous to people who know about Tibetan Buddhism. In the Kagyu and Nyingma school, this is a thing that you do. It's a significant period of time in terms of human physiology to really regenerate, like we would look at it now, not using Tibetan physiological principles, but like almost every nerve in your body and your brain has been replaced with a new one during that time. So to stay in a cloistered retreat environment that time and have nothing that isn't Dharma related is a real special thing, real privilege, and I was able to do it through just sheer, good fortune and Lama Tarchin's willingness to bring me in. So I did that under Lama Tarchin Rinpoche's guidance pretty late on, in my roundup right after I turned 50. So after a lot of very intensive practice and working life and these shorter retreats, then I went in pretty late into that. And I was the oldest person inside the retreat facility. So that was interesting with people that they're in their 30s, 20s and 30s. So, yeah, that was great.
It's interesting. Excuse me. It's interesting to hear that you had 20 years of practice under your belt before you took on that 3-year retreat.
Almost, yeah. And I thought I was so knowledgeable. That's the thing. I was pretty good at that point. I was no way. You discover so many things about yourself when you're when your pacifiers of the internet or TV or love or sex is all taken away from you. Then you'll have you in your mind, and then in a group retreat like the 3-year, you have other people around to annoy you. But however your mind works, and I discovered, for example, that I was controlling. I always thought I was like this free-spirited person who anybody could do anything and I could roll with it. No way. I discovered there that I wanted to control everyone. And it was like a little child, I was so immature in Dharma, even at 50. And I probably still am, but I just, it brings, if nothing else, what you have to face, what you have to deal with. So I did it. Just as a side note, an important thing is I did a 3-year retreat, and then I took a year off. I did another year-long retreat at home, and was in the year-long retreat that was alone, where I suddenly realized that maybe it wasn't all these outside phenomena that were causing me to have anxiety, because I set up some project in the yard. It was totally just because I had a bunch of stuff around the house to make a little deck to sit out and meditate on. And I thought this would be cool. We could sit outside, all this stuff. And then when I realized I needed some more parts for it, and there was nobody, I had shoppers, but I didn't have anybody to go to the hardware store for me. Then I felt this anxiety welling up. My God, I can't make the deck. What am I going to do? And in that moment, I realized it was all fabricated. My mind. It was a mental habit. And you have to be in a relaxed state as your baseline before you can have these revelations and actually change, because most of us are just caught up in our thoughts and emotions constantly at a high level. We aren't even aware of it, but we're just buzzing along. They always use a metaphor of like a animal being led along by its nose. You're following these random thoughts and emotions that come into your mind. But when you gear it all down over a path of training of 20 or 30 years, then when you get really upset and where you start obsessing about something, it's obvious. So I just realized that recently I don't get mad very much anymore. Really, really rare. And then the other day, something pushed my buttons and that I would have no idea, just totally enraged me. It felt so horrible. My body felt like I was a disease that had overtaken me, because I'm so lucky to be free of that anger now. Not through suppressing it, but through actually rooting it out, through the processes of Mahayana and Vajra Buddhism. So it's great not to be driven on by our habits, because this, in a Buddhist frame, it's called bakchak, right? The karmic habits that we carry with us. It's not really an I that goes from life to life. It's not really a person or a soul. But there's this transference of patterning, let's say, of consciousness from one body to the next based on our karmic habits. And clearly, I had karmic habits, and I also had family habits. Probably my anxiety habit matched my I probably saw my parents together when I was in the bardo, and I saw them being anxious about something. I thought, well, this is familiar. I'm definitely going in that family.
In case anyone's not familiar with what you're referring to, there's this idea in Tibetan Buddhism that the bardo state, and you're drawn to your next parents in your next lifetime based on what feels familiar.
Right. So first of all, there's these dull lights in the Sipe Bardo, or the Bardo of Becoming, it's called. When they're towards the end of your Bardo experience, and you can see them, each realm for animals or a ghost or in various God realm. Then the human realm's you have to have a lot of merit, sort of good jujus added up in order to have one of these really nice births, like a human birth, and the human birth is the best for Dharma practice. So I got that much. I got something resonated with the human realm. I wasn't, going to hell or something, but I just then it's when I got to the human vibration color. I don't know if it's literal or not, but this is how it's expressed in the mystical literature.
Yeah.
Then I had to. Then parents, what parents am I just automatically drawn to? You don't have, as an unenlightened person like me, you don't have control over your next birth. But you do. You zoom on out of control based on this Bhakchakra habits.
Yeah.
So that's
yeah.
Yeah.
Hence the incredible good fortune of cleaning up a habit pattern like anger. Like people talk about, these miraculous things in Tibetan Buddhism, but to me, that sounds miracle I would choose if I got to, choose between leaving my handprint in a rock or like not feeling angry anymore. Oh my gosh.
Yeah, because they say, I've rarely seen miracles, but they say that a demon can manifest miracles. A demon could
So
leave
it's
their
not a
handprint
great
in rock.
guide to what is
Right.
true.
A demon could fly. A demon could do this and that because they're all really focused on gaining power, right? So really negative people can really be focused on gaining power because they want power over others, right? So those are really not of that much concern. They impress us, they certainly do, because we know Rinpoche Rinpoche who did put his staff into a rock and it's still there. I think it's listed in the tourist guides now. The staff is still there.
That's incredible.
So he's not a demon, he's a Buddha, but that's not what that's not how you know he's a Buddha, really.
Yeah.
Because of the quality of his mind and his conduct and so forth. So
yeah. Well, I guess having discussed that 3-year retreat now and also your subsequent 1-year retreat, what was that transition like into beginning to teach the Dharma? How did it come about? You've already mentioned this, like the wonderful image of the letter with the stamp. Like, what was that like for you as a Dharma student?
Well, I was scared about what the Tibetan establishment would, make of me. And
what year was this approximately?
not that long ago,
so I can,
like 5 years ago.
okay.
I mean, Rinpoche authorized me to teach Nundro in like 2001 or something, 2002 or something like that. So, I mean, I was teaching as a senior student for a long time. So in between retreats, and I like it, frankly. You're supposed to say, "Oh, I didn't want to teach. I couldn't possibly do that." But I like to share my love of the principles of Dharma, the practice, and the lamas. These incredible masters that I had the incredible privilege to know a little bit. Not in any. I've never been a special student of a lama, like a heart disciple or anything like that. I'm just a hanger-on. But they were so kind to me. So, where did I get off what was the question?
Well, the question was really, what was it like to kind of make that transition into being, well, I guess I would refine the question now, not just a senior student, but really stepping into that Loppon role.
Well, I had questions like, should I use a title? Should I wear, like today even, should I wear the traditional teaching garment, the Zen? And should I, how I'm making this up, particularly because I was at the Lama who authorized me to teach was not in a system, So there, I mean, I'm teaching for a certain group of practices because he was a Dujum Tirsar teacher, so was Lama Tarchen. And Rinpoche Rinpoche hasn't authorized me to teach. I haven't seen him in 13 years, who knows? I'm focused on this Dujum Tirsar tradition within the Nyingma school, and I'm using those as the texts and the practices. But there isn't anybody, telling me I should do things. This is the kind of skirt I should wear, or maybe I should wear pants. And this superficial, I know. But how to do it, I asked him. Rinpoche was around for a while, a year or so after he authorized me to teach. And so I asked him all the questions I could think of about how I should do things and what I should focus on with people. And then it's been up to then of course we've had a pandemic for quite a long time, but yeah, so I started an organization, nonprofit, and like everybody does, because you have to have some way for the thing to function.
Yeah.
How also Buddhism is a tradition of humble people who don't toot their own horn. And what do we do with that? Nobody's going to know you're teaching. You can't help people with your teaching if nobody knows you exist.
Right. Instagram is not made for people who don't want to share what they're doing.
God, I tried all kinds of social media, and then trying to figure out it all. I also wrote a couple of books for teenagers about Buddhism, novels that incorporated Buddhist principles in their personal growth. And so I'm trying to
have links, by the way, to all these things in the show notes. I want to ask you about Mayu Mountain, the organization that you founded, and what teachings you're offering. If anybody's listening and they're thinking, "Oh, I want to learn from Loppon Yudron Wangmo," you will have an opportunity. I want to make sure we talk about that at the end too.
It's been really interesting to see who comes, who shows up. And I've kind of attracted people who already have a background in Vajrayana Buddhism. Much to my surprise, I was trying to connect, like you are, with newcomers to Buddhism. It's very difficult because, number one, you're going towards them, which is kind of inappropriate. Not you. We're trying to reach out to them. They should be, if they're interested, they should be coming to us. But the truth is they're going to go to an established Dharma center and a famous person if they're seeking out Dharma. And those centers don't always have beginners, very, very beginners programs. I'm really into beginners programs.